Okay, so education equals economic growth, right? I mean, it's basically a given. You build schools, you get kids into classrooms, and boom, your whole economy transforms. But what happens when you pour resources into education? Your economy grows on paper, but structurally, your society basically stays exactly the same. Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're going to solve a massive economic mystery that has literally left development experts scratching their heads for years. It's called the schooling growth puzzle. So grab a seat because we're going to look past those surface level numbers and uncover what's actually happening behind the scenes. To set the stage, there's this striking macroeconomic paradox taking place on the African continent right now. Get this. Africa is currently home to about 60% of the world's fastest growing economies. 60%. By all traditional measures, there's an absolute economic boom happening. But here's the catch. Despite this massive growth, we are seeing virtually no dramatic structural changes in these economies. More specifically, manufacturing is just completely stagnant. That rapid growth isn't translating into shiny new factories or massive tech industries or high-value exports. It's an economic boom that somehow isn't changing the fundamental setup of the society. So, we've got to ask, why? Why hasn't this incredible, world-leading economic growth boosted African manufacturing? This is the central mystery that development experts have been tirelessly trying to unravel. Usually, when a country gets richer, its capacity to physically produce things scales up massively. But here, manufacturing's share of the overall economy just hasn't budged. We've got the rapid growth, but we're missing the industrial leap. So, what exactly is the missing ingredient here? Well, to really understand this mystery, we first need to quickly define what experts actually expect to see when economies grow fast. It's a concept called structural transformation. Simply put, this is the transfer of labor skills from low productivity sectors, like basic subsistence agriculture, into high productivity sectors, especially manufacturing. It's the classic story of human progress, right? Moving from the farm to running advanced machinery in factories, which then multiplies the value of everyone's labor. And this is exactly the transformation that seems to be stubbornly stalling out. And that brings us to the formal academic term for this exact headache, the schooling growth puzzle. This basically defines the missing link between increased basic education and actual economic structural change. See, for decades, the global consensus was super simple. They thought, just give everyone basic education, and that structural transformation will naturally follow. And to be fair, basic education rates in Africa have totally soared. Yet, that expected manufacturing boom just never arrived. The pieces of the puzzle just aren't fitting together the way the old textbooks promised they would. Enter researcher Oluyomi Oladavid. She took one look at this continental paradox and realized that, hey, maybe we've all been looking at this puzzle completely wrong. She wasn't satisfied with the traditional answers everyone else was just accepting, so she launched a truly groundbreaking investigation to find these specific factors explaining this disconnect, zoning in on the skills structural transformation debate. She literally took it upon herself to dig way deeper into the actual quality of the human capital being produced. And almost immediately, she pinpointed the exact flaw in past research. You see, previous highly influential studies, like the big ones by Hanishek and Wussman, mostly focused on basic cognitive ability. We're talking primary school level reading and math. But she discovered that those older studies completely missed something absolutely crucial. Schooling quality differences across countries are actually magnified significantly at the secondary and post-secondary levels. By only looking at basic education, past researchers were totally missing the massive quality gaps happening right before students actually entered the workforce. Which leads directly to her major light bulb moment. The skills required in today's highly technology-intensive world, they're acquired at the tertiary level of education. We live in a modern knowledge economy now. Obviously, basic literacy is wonderful and totally necessary, but let's be real. Knowing how to read doesn't automatically teach you how to engineer a new manufacturing process, or optimize a global supply chain, or code advanced software. Those high-level skills, the ones that actually build factories and transform economies, those are forged in post-secondary institutions. So, with that in mind, she and her team framed the exact question they needed to investigate. Do differences in post-secondary schooling quality across Africa explain the variation in manufacturing performance? It's such a brilliant pivot. Instead of just asking, hey, how many people went to school? She asked, how good is the absolute highest level of schooling they received, and does that specific quality dictate whether a country can actually build a manufacturing sector? But to answer that, she knew she had to build an entirely new database from scratch. So that's exactly what she did. She built a brand new database specifically focused on post-secondary quality. But think about it. How do you actually measure quality across entirely different countries with totally different grading systems? Well, her stroke of genius was using country-level average GMAT test scores as the main proxy for schooling quality. Because the GMAT is a standardized global test for analytical and quantitative skills, it provided the perfect, level playing field to measure true cognitive quality. From there, she analyzed the causal relationship between those test scores and the transition to large-scale manufacturing. Now, she didn't just stop there. She was incredibly rigorous about this. To make sure her findings were bulletproof, she controlled for a massive laundry list of systemic variables. She factored out corruption, distortions in currency markets like black market premiums, overall institutional quality, geography, the raw budget allocated to education, and even the occupational mix of the graduates. By isolating all of these noisy variables, she made absolutely sure that if she found a connection between education quality and manufacturing, it was the undeniable truth, and not just some statistical fluke. And after crunching all of this data, controlling for every conceivable variable, and mapping standardized high-level intellect directly against industrial output, she finally isolated the missing link. She found the exact hidden mechanism that had been stalling Africa's structural transformation. Are you ready to see what she uncovered? The numbers were undeniable. She found a strong, positive, and significant relationship between higher GMAT scores, meaning better post-secondary quality, and increased manufacturing performance. It's a direct, measurable link. And furthermore, that higher post-secondary quality directly accelerates overall economic growth. She effectively proved that you literally cannot just build a factory. You absolutely need the high-level human capital to run it, innovate within it, and scale it up. Think about this in the context of your own economy for a second. We constantly hear politicians talking about physical infrastructure, right? Building new roads, bridges, power plants, and factories. But her research forces us to pivot to thinking about human infrastructure, building minds, analytical skills, and the capacity for rapid technology adoption. You can pour billions and billions into physical concrete, but if you don't have the human infrastructure to actually utilize it, your economy is just going to stagnate. In her paper, she summarizes this perfectly. She writes, "While regulatory reforms are necessary, upgrade of human infrastructure is most crucial for the transformation of African economies." Notice that specific phrase she uses there, human infrastructure. I love that. It totally reframes education. It's no longer just a nice social good. It is the absolute most crucial foundational structure required to actually carry an economy into the future. And it gets even better, because she found that this high-quality education doesn't just build factories. It builds fundamentally better societies. When you prioritize schooling quality, you don't just get faster adoption of new technologies. You actually get increased involvement in civic activities. You start seeing a shift towards more efficient political systems and vastly better economic management techniques across the board. Quality education literally creates a population that is capable of managing complex, modern, democratic, and industrial systems. To prove her point practically, she draws a fascinating comparison between Africa's current structural transformation goals and Asian exemplars like South Korea and Singapore, who have already successfully navigated this exact path. How did they do it? Well, they placed a massive historical emphasis on education, and specifically schooling quality, in both their policy and practice. Their real-world historical track record perfectly aligns with her modern data findings. Quality is literally the bridge they crossed to reach full industrialization. Now, to be fair, she is very careful to acknowledge the progress that has been made so far. Over the last decade or so, basic education in Africa has dramatically improved. The Millennium Development Goals, or MDGs, were incredibly successful at prioritizing universal basic education, getting millions of children into primary schools. And that was a fantastic, totally necessary start. But her research is loudly signaling that this is not the finish line. We essentially solved the quantity problem at the bottom, but we totally neglected the quality problem at the top. And remember, those initial improvements to basic education were largely powered by incredible financial tailwinds. We're talking resource booms, significant donor support from developed countries, and massive pushes from multilateral agencies. Basically, there was a huge, unified global push for basic literacy. But now, the nature of the challenge is shifting, and our global strategy has to shift right along with it. Which brings us to her final, resounding resolution. We successfully said yes to basic education. But now we need a greater yes to schooling quality. She argues that any post-2015 development framework must urgently pivot. we have to encourage heavy, serious investment in the actual quality of secondary and post-secondary schooling, because according to the data, that is the only way we will see real structural transformation, genuine poverty reduction, and the accelerated economic development that the continent is so poised for. And that leaves us with a lingering question to wrap up today's explainer. I want you to look at the policies in your own country or the global development goals that you support and just ask yourself, are we truly investing enough in the quality of tomorrow's thinkers? Or are we just counting the number of seats filled in a classroom and calling it a day? Oluyemi Oladavid showed us clearly that if we want to build the future, we have to build the human infrastructure first. Thanks so much for joining me today, and keep asking the right questions.